It has been impossible to keep up. It's the new normal. Mass shootings every day. There was a time in this country not that long ago either when someone being shot in cold blood was actually shocking. Remember how we reacted in 1980 when John Lennon, the author of that beautiful song we just heard, was murdered outside his apartment building by a deranged loner with a gun. You couldn't call it an assassination, such as had been committed against Martin Luther King Jr. and John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. It was an unheard of kind of random violence and senseless death that we have now gotten used to. Today I hear parents from this congregation saying, "My child is doing drills in her classroom about what to do if there's a shooter in the building. We've come to this." So this is how we as a nation have decided it's okay to proceed in the new reality. I was one of the fools who thought things would change after the Sandy Hook massacre of those little babies in 2012, almost exactly 3 years ago this week. 350 mass shootings later in this nation, I have come to understand that gun culture is an American religion, centered around an ancient, demanding God, the gun, that promises security and victory over one's enemies, real or imagined, including the psychological enemy of fear and vulnerability and threats to the macho ego. Millions of people enthrall to this blooding God are willing to make human sacrifices to it on an increasingly frequent basis in order to appease their own sense of anxiety and a terrorist threat that they feel they cannot manage. Now, I want to say to you right now that these are just thoughts I'm having. I am trying not to condemn, but to think creatively. Because when we get stuck in a place or on an issue, it's really important for us to look at unconscious material, the shadow things that we don't really understand about what motivates us as a people or as communities, and bring things to light that might be worth looking at. And so that's part of what I'm doing, and I don't mean that anybody who owns a firearm is enthralled to this religion. I'm talking about the cold dead hands people. You know, you'll pry this from my cold dead hand if there's any kind of legislation suggested to limit access to guns and automatic weapons and this kind of increasing militarization of our country, police and civilians. Of the mass shootings that occur in America on a daily basis now, only a tiny percentage of them are carried out by extremists of other religions than Christianity, or the quasi-religion of existential nihilism. Nothing matters. There is no meaning. I'm going to go and take a whole bunch of people out with me when I go. But now we wait with bated breath after a mass shooting. I know I do anyway, after, for instance, the most recent Planned Parenthood murders. You could guess that the guy, this one, was going to be a homegrown Christian terrorist. You could pretty much guess that was likely to be what was going on, and he was, and we've seen it before. So everyone says, damn religion, crazy superstition. And other Christians wring their hands and say, that's not what Christianity is. That's not what any of us believe or would ever support. And it's madness. It's not our religion. Controlling women's bodies is not part of our religion. And then before we could catch our breath after that murder, multiple murder, the terrible situation in San Bernardino captured the news coverage. and our collective attention. Again, religious people held our breath, wondering, would it be more religious terrorism? Well, it was. Some combination. It's a weird situation. We still don't know the motives exactly, but some things have come to light that lead us to understand that the people who committed these crimes were, the woman was into Islamic extremism. She had been radicalized, as we say, and there was also some workplace conflict that we don't know about and some enmity on the personal level. And again, the cries of damned, destructive religion that leads people to do these hateful, crazy things. And the response from the Muslim community saying, no, this is not our religion. This is a perversion of our religion. Please don't understand this as Islam. Please do not judge all of us by this madness. But it looks overall to many frustrated, grieving, enraged, mourning people as though religion is to blame for the current situation in the United States, the violence. I hear this a lot. People are disbanding or abandoning any kind of religious practice, religious community, and openly mocking it and blaming it and saying, why don't you people just stop? Get rid of it all, say critics like Christopher Hitchens. Imagine no religion. They all enslave the human mind and set up tribal factions, enthralled to superstitions and stupidities that justify bloodlust. Perhaps you have heard this at your own family gatherings by people who wonder why you're still involved in a church. I don't think any of us would argue with Christopher Hitchens about religion's history of violence, hatred, prejudice, and ignorance, or about the particular horrors of extremist forms of religion that have led to terrorist threats that frighten so many of us right now for good reason. But unfortunately, religion itself is not the culprit. Human nature is the culprit. And whether or not someone subscribes to a particular religious tradition or participates in its rituals or believes its doctrines is not actually a reliable indicator of their character or their behavior. Also, we know this, all religions are too big and complicated to be divined by any sect or practitioner of them. There's that also. That is why we have schisms all the time and robust debate about whose version is right, true, and correct. I noticed yesterday a United Church of Christ minister posted this beautiful meditation on a group of Indian men, not Christian, who had come to support a friend of theirs who was reading scripture in his church service. So they all came, 30 of them. And when the invitation came to take communion, well, they, being supportive of their friend, all got up to take communion. And so this was just a lovely meditation on the graciousness of God and hospitality and just how nice. And of course, in the comments, right away, you get the guy who's like, that's your interpretation. We know that no one should be at that table unless they have accepted Christ into their, and I'm like, oh, of course, Mr. Hollyberries and Mistletoe had to weigh in. And I said to the friend who had written it, I said, well, good thing we got Jesus instead of that guy. And so, you can say, well, my religion doesn't try to exclude anybody from the table. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that, just some talking points for people who say, why are you still doing that? We don't try to control people's sexuality and bodies, which is one of Hitchens' major accusations against religions, prohibitions of contraception, homosexuality, sexual pleasure, etc. We don't teach supernatural religion with a wrathful Father God, or a gendered God, by the way, who grants some people victory and others suffering, or makes some rich and others poor. We do not exploit vulnerable people's desire to believe in miracles by setting up pilgrimage sites where supposedly miraculous healings can occur. I actually have no real problem with those sites. I think they can be very powerful spiritual places. Our pilgrimage spot is pretty much Walden Pond, where we learn to just appreciate nature and Thoreau. Sorry, inside you joke. Okay. We do not cling to one text as the source of all wisdom, rejecting the moral insights that are given by literature and by secular authors. We do not teach that people cannot be good and ethical without belief in traditional religious doctrine. We know that people can be good without religion or without a belief in God or any particular religious doctrine. We do not resist the rational or reject the insights and information that come to us via the sciences. In fact, our religious tradition celebrates the sciences as central to human flourishing, and we eagerly incorporate new understanding into our worldview. But when upset and indignant Americans read the news and see that Christian terrorists have murdered more people, or Islamist terrorists, Islamist extremists have done the same, and they make a call to eradicate religion, they are never thinking about religious community or congregational life. Christopher Hitchens, in fact, in his whole book, Trashing Religion for Many Good Reasons, never once makes mention or acknowledges religious community or congregational life. He doesn't experience it. He doesn't know that it can transcend doctrine and creed. He doesn't understand how much there is, how much meaning, how much strength, how much hope, how much understanding we gain, how much spiritual maturity, how many ways we strengthen our muscles of morality by being in community together. As I suggested earlier, I have genuinely come to believe that there is an unofficial religion in America that worships the gun god and accepts human sacrifice as the necessary tribute to pay in exchange for a false sense of security and for what it calls liberty. I am not alone in this instinct. George Will, who is a conservative columnist, and Walter Wink, on the other end of the spectrum, a liberal social justice theologian, have both suggested the same thing and written persuasively about it. I noticed a headline that ran in the New York Daily News the other day calling NRA President Wayne LaPierre a terrorist. And the head of, and this was part of the headline, a quote, sick gun jihad against America in the name of profit. This really interested me. I thought this is a very important linguistic rhetorical shift. The idea that gun culture is psychologically religious in nature, that's part of what's coming out that people are wondering about. Maybe we can help get through the logjam by examining that. And a very important shift that the Daily News editor, and of course they're great at hyperbolic, sensationalism, but that editor chose to use the term jihad rather than crusade, identifying LaPierre with Islamist extremists rather than Christian ones. Very inflammatory and yet creative, moving the conversation in ways that start with kind of bold and controversial statements. I'm going to stop here because I'm overwhelmed by the violence in our society. I'm overwhelmed by the grief and by the sense of futility and hopelessness that I do not want to give into, and I do not want us to give into. And I have actually probably the most important part of today's service for me is lengthy words of commission that help us to not give up hope, which we'll hear in a bit. And I also, because this season, as I said earlier, I want very much not to bombard you with words and opinions, but to take strength and solace in being together. I pray that we will engage in important conversations wherever we are, as centered and loving and informed people. I am struggling with the loving part lately myself. I ask you to help model that for me and with me. I pray that we will allow there to be silences in between our thoughts and our outrage that allow for grace to move in, the unearned love that comes from God. Thank you for listening and for being in the work together with me. Mis estimados, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. I have heard from so many people recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. They are concerned about the state of affairs in our world right now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized, visionary people.
Yet I urge you, ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially, do not lose hope, most particularly because the fact is, we were made for these times. Yes, for years we have been learning, practicing, been in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. In any dark time, there is a tendency to veer toward fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in this world. Do not focus on that. This is a tendency, too, to fall into being weakened by perseverating on what is outside your reach, by what cannot yet be.
Do not focus there. That is spending the wind without raising the sails. We are needed. That is all we can know. And though we meet resistance, we more so will meet great souls who will hail us, love us, and guide us. And we will know them when they appear. Didn't you say that you were a believer? Didn't you say you pledged to listen to a voice greater? Didn't you ask for grace? Don't you remember that to be in grace means to submit to the voice greater? Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale.
One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, builds signal fires, causes proper matters to catch fire.
To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy towards others, both are acts of immense bravery and greatest need.
Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do.
There will always be times when you feel discouraged. I too have felt despair many times in my life, but I do not keep a chair for it. I will not entertain it. It is not allowed to eat from my plate. The reason is this. In my uttermost bones, I know something, as do you. It is that there can be no despair when you remember why you came to earth, who you serve, and who sent you here. The good words we say and the good deeds we do are not ours. They are the words and deeds of the one who brought us here.
In that spirit, I hope you will write this on your wall. When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe. There can be no doubt. But that is not what great ships are built for.